Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, salam, wherever you're watching us from. Tell us in the chat where you're sitting in the world. Welcome to MACFEST Islamophobia panel. This is the event that MACFEST is hosting every year to challenge the misconceptions. And today's host is Safia Ascoli-Ball. So Safia Florence Ascoli-Ball converted to Islam 28 years ago. And she studied in France. She's got a master's in international marketing and foreign language. Now she lives in Manchester with her husband and children, and she works on various projects relating to her two main interests: improving Muslim women's physical well-being as an instructor of Pilates and Taekwondo, and spreading good quality knowledge about Islam as a French translator of various literature, including the book Jesus, Prophet of Islam, and throughout Bait al-Kima Productions, a project set up in partnership with Dr. Salah Al-Jazari, historian and author of dozens of books on Islamic civilizations. We did have an event with Dr. Salah last year, so if you are interested, you can look it up on MACFEST YouTube channel. So as I said before, say hello in the chat, tell us where you're sitting in the world. If you have any questions throughout the event, please post them in the chat or in the Q&A portal. We will pick them up and try to answer them all today. And now over to you, Safia.
Thank you very much, Katarzyna. Always nice to see you and be part of MACFEST. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings of God upon you all, wherever you are. Hello, and as you said, good morning, good evening, as we have quite a wide audience from all parts of the world. So yet again, I am very, very pleased to be moderating, presenting this MACFEST talk and panel discussion. It's always a great honor to be taking part in this wonderful effort. Today we're going to talk about, as you know, Islamophobia, and we have 4 different views, contributions, which I hope you will find very interesting and insightful. I am personally very excited and keen to hear from our different guests. We will start today with, first we will start with a brother, Suleiman Martinez, who is from Spain, who is a convert. Then we will hear from Amna, who is a student living in England. Then I will contribute a little bit my experience as a French person. And we will have Dr. Saqib Qureshi, who is an author and businessman, as well as a producer. And he will talk to us about his experience in Canada, but also his latest book. So I hope you will all enjoy all its different contributions. So inshallah, we will start with Suleiman. Suleiman Martinez is originally from Madrid, Spain. He spent a large part of his childhood and youth in the UK and Canada, where he studied computer programming and psychology. He was an entrepreneur in the technical translation industry for 10 years, and for the last 15 years, he has been working as an independent business coach and consultant, and also now leads workshops on personal development. Suleiman converted to Islam 10 years ago, mashallah, and 7 years ago, he moved with his wife to Orgiva, or Orgiva, I guess, in the south of Spain, in Al-Andalus, where their 2 children have been born. In Orgiva, he found that there was a growing community with a lot of young children. Seeing the danger of educating Muslim children through the Spanish public school system and homeschooling being banned, he and 2 Muslim women started working on setting up the first ever primary Muslim school of Spain. So for him, education is one of the answers to combat Islamophobia, both for the minds and spirits of young Muslims, so they feel they belong to a worthy ummah community, Muslim community, And so they are better prepared to debate with non-Muslims about some of the more controversial issues. However, he finds important especially to educate children in good adab, that is, good character, good manners, as probably the best way to counteract Islamophobia. So, Suleiman, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Very nice to have you. Suleiman, I'm not sure I can hear you.
Can you hear? You can't hear me?
That is good. No, that's all good now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your introduction, Sister Safia. So experience here with Islamophobia in Spain, I think there's an additional, I mean, we have the same issues, I think that in general, we find of people being very polarized about their views and keeping the other, like the foreign, the other as something foreign to us, so it's the enemy. But in Spain, we have, I think, an additional layer where Spain was run by, let's say, Muslims who are in Spain for about 800 years. So Muslims have been outside of Spain officially for 500 years. So they were here for a lot longer than the time has elapsed since they went. So there's now in Spain like a drive with the right-wing politics to identify crusader values. Let's not, they want to come back and take Spain over again, so they have this, in the same way that a lot of Muslims, because we receive a lot of Muslims here in Rochdale from all over the world. They travel to the Alhambra, the Cordoba, etc. And, the Al-Andalus has these reverberations in the spirits of Muslims all over the world. For Spanish people, there's also this fear of being overrun again by the Muslims. So people are actually using this to further their political careers, for instance. So to give you an example, I was contacted last year by a fellow. He's 17, 18. He knows everything about Islam. He's really interested in becoming Muslim, but he's really afraid because in his village, everyone is really anti-Muslim. So he won't make Shahada because he says the moment I make Shahada, I'm going to have to pray, stop eating pork, etc., etc. And I'm going to have lots of problems, this sort of thing. I have to say that I was really lucky. My family were a little bit like that also, but when I converted to Islam, everyone, my sisters, my mother, they were really happy and they really supported me. But for instance, there's a fellow who converted to Islam and his mother told them the following: I would rather you have died than you became Muslim. So this is really, really strong to hear from your parents. So the other thing is, for instance, we live here in Orchiva in a community where there's, let's say, 10% of the community is Muslim, and mostly, besides being Muslim, they're foreign people, not only immigrants for, let's say, Maghrebi countries or Arab countries, also a lot of Muslims from the UK, from the US, they come here. And they've created a little bit of a different environment where people are basically accepted, but we're seen as becoming, being in a sort of a silo, isolated from the rest. Even though we make efforts to activities that engage the rest of the community. Yesterday, this morning I was having coffee with a brother and he said, yesterday this happened, somebody did something he shouldn't have done, obviously, a Muslim. And the neighbor, saw him and said, you people come here and think you can do anything you want, So right away generalizing, this was not really well done what he did, but so this is like underlying a fear of being overtaken again. So what's happening now with the I think everybody's seeing this with the social media. You only get to see what you choose, what's really according to your views already. So your idea of the world becomes more and more, let's say, self confirming. You don't see any other opinions easily. But my sense is that here, for instance, we have neighbors where we live just outside town, and we try to talk to them. Well, no, we actually talk to them and go visit them. They come visit us, and when that happens, this connection, then is very difficult to keep as some sort of foreign evil thing that you can't have in your mind. So one of the things I think is, like close contact, I think will not survive, does not, sorry, close contact, the other way around. Let's say this idea of the other as a foreign, strange entity dissolves really easily or much easier if you actually have contact with them, see them every day, bring them something for their kids, have their kids play with your kids, etc. But of course, for our kids, we have a problem that when they go to public school, they become completely bombarded with all the messages in Spain, especially this woke thing. Since they're like 5, 6, 7, they're already being told that you have to try different sexual orientations, and they can choose, and they should choose, and nothing is forever. So no matter how you try to have this sense of community and adab and what's good and what's halal, what's haram, they get really right away contaminated, I think polluted, I would say. And then, of course, there's this thing between the youth here, at least for us in Spain, that they've grown up in a convert family, Muslim family, and they go to primary school, especially high school, and they're really, drawn by the cool guys, the cool girls that do these other things. And this is where I think there's a lot of impact for the families. We see the kids are coming to the masjid for a long time, and then they become, they're 12, 13, 14, and they disappear. This is one thing that we're noticing here, right? And I think the sense of being pointed out here where we live is not so as Muslims. I mean, it's not so bad because most people here are relatively affluent. They have little small businesses, and people who buy houses, buy homes, etc. But I do know we're receiving here in Orchiba a lot of people from France, for instance, from the UK, and from the Netherlands, people who say that you just can't walk in the street and look Muslim, for instance. So I don't know if this eventually will arrive in Spain, but right now we're more or less safe, and this is like a little haven for these people, for Muslims. But I think in Spain it's mostly the sense of as long as the Arabs come, the Muslim come and they work in the fields like that, and then they go back home, it's okay. But once they start to become want to become part of society, then we have problems. Anyways, we all know. Spain is a country that produced many immigrants for a long time. And the idea that most people had of Spanish people were poor people, uneducated people, etc. And it is true that a lot of the Muslims who come to Spain come for let's say basic labor jobs and blue collar jobs and this sort of thing. So this is the sense that we have of people who are uneducated and rough, and you can't really trust them.
Thank you. Yes, that's very insightful on the sort of the general picture of the situation in Spain. I was wondering if you had a particular personal experience where you felt maybe the victim of Islamophobia yourself, or maybe your immediate family. And also my other question would be, have you seen a change for the last 15 years? Has it become maybe better, or has it become worse according to you? Or is it just the same? There's no real change. What would you say?
So with regards to your first question, I have to say that there's a sense of since I'm Spanish, I speak Spanish, and I don't, I mean, if I have a little thing on, then I look Arab, but if not, I look Spanish. People in Spanish in Spain look a little bit like. So I feel like I'm protected from this sort of thing. However, where I live, like on the countryside, there's a house right in front. It's uninhabited, and one day, like last year, I came out, and it says, "Muslims get out." Like a big graffiti. And really, actually said Moors get out, because in Spanish, Moros, It was really impactful, really impactful. Immediately I thought of my children, if they go anywhere and say, "Oh, you're a Muslim," and it was there for 2 days, and the owner or someone from the town hall came and took it up. But what I realized with the same with what I was mentioning before is that people, they're civil here because people are very relatively civil, but underneath, then you realize that if if push comes to shove, you know, you're Muslim, and then you're not to be trusted in general, you know. So this was really impactful. Actually, I have to say that for a few days, I was like walking around with a different inner state, you know, like all of a sudden I didn't feel in my country. All of a sudden I didn't feel like, you know, it was incredible, really incredible. I had an experience. It wasn't in Spain, but it was from a European person. We were in Istanbul, and this was like 2 weeks ago, and these were like really educated people. And especially one of the ladies insisted that she didn't want to be there because this is a country where women are basically kept in the home and not allowed to go out. Istanbul, you know, Istanbul. And I said, "But I mean, the policemen and there's police women with guns and machine guns. There's army people, army ladies, you know, at immigrations, the tram drivers, the bus drivers." So then, you know, I talked and I saw that she has this thing already set in her house and she doesn't want to look. Especially Istanbul is about us. And you know, this lady is like a high-level consultant. She's originally French, but now she lives in Germany. I don't know. She's traveled all over the world. So I see a little bit the idea that one thing is arguments or reasons, and another one is an ideology. And people are really remiss to let go of an ideology, even when, you know, I'm not going to let reality interfere with my ideas, sort of thing, you know. And this was really shocking because I started trying to speak, you know, but can't you see this? And I saw that she did not want to see it. So I think this is a little bit what's going on here, you know. And when you're faced with this, thinking that people are reasonable, then you know, with an ideology, there's not very much you can reason about. So in your second part of the question, it escaped me. That was my personal experience.
Yeah.
Right.
If you felt that things have changed, I mean, how things have changed over the last years, would you say?
In general, it is following in Spain the same progression that is felt with immigration in general. People were not racist before in Spain, and they weren't because there's no real immigration, people from other races, no? So there's not a problem. People were not anti-Muslim in general, but now that having, you know, huge communities in different areas and they're taking over, then this is becoming more. That's on the one hand, and on the other is there's one political party which, you know, from the Islamophobia aspect, all the rest, like family values, they can, you know, go back to we would any Muslim would vote for them. They're saying, you know, Muslims are the problem. Muslims, you know, are after women, they're raping women, they steal. They just say these things, even though they're not true. But, you know, I think the UK happened. You just throw out like anything, and then, you know, the results are terrible. And this is it's getting worse because people also need like clearer, simpler answers. And so now the problem is the Muslims. You know, we have to be careful with them. So I think it's getting worse in the sense of more acute.
Thank you. That was very interesting, and I'm sure we'll definitely have a further conversation once we've went through other countries and to compare the situation back to you afterwards. Thank you very much, Suleiman. We're going to move on. We're moving on now to Amna Inayat. So Amna Inayat is a final year student of English language and literature at the University of Salford. She is deeply passionate about promoting inclusion and tackling issues like Islamophobia, which she has actively worked against through various leadership roles. As president of the Islamic Society, she led awareness campaigns, including the Islamophobia Awareness Project, hosted educational events, and created safe spaces for dialogue to challenge stereotypes and foster understanding. She enjoys working with diverse communities, planning meaningful events, and using her voice to inspire positive change. Through her studies and experiences, she has grown into a confident communicator and compassionate leader, always ready to stand up for what matters, mashallah. So, Amna, would love to hear from you now.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello.
Walaikum.
Hi, thank you so much, Safia, for the introduction. Good morning or good evening to everyone who has joined the session. And thank you so much for the opportunity as well. Yes, well, it was lovely hearing from Suleiman as well. Thank you for such an insightful explanation of everything that you or people might experience in Spain. In terms of myself, I would like to focus on student perspective, and especially my own experience or the people I worked with or the students I worked with, their experiences regarding Islamophobia. Considering it is something very important and it's growing a lot in UK as well, like due to the recent riot attack as well. It has grown a lot, unfortunately. So I am a president of Islamic Society in Salford for 2 years now, and before that I was event manager. So year 2023, when I was was my first year as a president, we were doing a charity stall. So this is the story that happened where all of the work on Islamophobia started in Salford. It was a charity stall that we usually do every year, like Islamic Society does, to raise funds for any sort of emergencies, orphans, or things like that. It was particularly in Islamophobia Awareness Month for the orphan around the globe in November 2023. We were approached by a woman, and she was ex-Catholic, and she said, "Oh, I don't believe in any of sort of religion," and she introduced herself like a atheist and someone who's interested to know about why Muslim women covers themselves. So I had few booklets that were free to give away for the awareness purposes. So I asked her if she would like to give a read to them, and she said no. And then she started asking me questions. I was like, okay, she might need a conversation. So we started having a conversation, me and one of my other colleagues as well. And then slowly from that normal asking question like why do women cover themselves, why do you guys wear this, slowly it start triggering towards accusations, and calling no, I believe that you covering yourself gaining more attention and it's for the purpose of attraction from the opposite gender, and so many, and slowly it keep triggering towards worse and worse, such as saying it's more seductive or doing things for more attraction from white men and trying to steal the attention from the non-Muslim women or women who doesn't cover themselves as much, and considering ourselves pure. And I said there is no such concept of like considering ourselves pure or looking down upon others. I have tried to explain her as much as we could, and that conversation last 4 hours. That everybody so it was a stall in the library of the university, and even the staff was looking that lady is not even leaving or not understanding. Then I thought in my head, because she mentioned a couple of terrorist attacks where someone she knows has lost their loved ones. So I thought maybe she might need some sympathy, and I said, oh, I understand that's a loss and no one should go through it and no one should do it, and we are against it as much as you would be, and I feel bad for you losing someone, you would equally feel bad for me losing someone. And she said, no, I won't. I won't feel bad if it happens to you or to the Muslim community. And I was like, no, sorry, that's the point. I know, no, this is not gonna go anywhere. And while we were trying to end the conversation, she said, maybe control your men not to be doing that attacks. And I was like, sorry, that's not something appropriate you should be saying. And then she goes like, I will give you a suggestion. So apparently all of this, the 4 hours conversation, was a feedback. It wasn't Islamophobia, and I shouldn't label it as Islamophobia. It's a feedback. So I said, okay, I'll leave you with either you study Islam or understand that the things that you are mentioned are nowhere near Islam, or you can look at television and the stories that the hatred that Muslims face, or you can look at the statistics by yourself and then come to the conclusion. She said, no, I know myself, I don't need any of this. And I was like, okay, thank you. And she said, one more feedback, have a poster in your hand, stand outside of the library, say, and allow people to do whatever they want. If they want to rip off your hijab, they should be okay to do that, because that's a freedom of speech. If they want to pull it, it should be okay. Or like, if they want to like see you, like see what you're wearing or anything, it should be okay. And I was like, no, thank you for your feedback, but this is not acceptable. I knew I need to raise it, but in that moment I was like, it was 4 hour long conversation and it was draining. So I was like, okay. That lady left, and the library staff. So I wouldn't generalize. That was my first, like, I shouldn't generalize it the way she has the opinion of generalizing everyone. So something very important is that the staff, that woman introduced herself. She used these words for herself. They are not my word. They're quote unquote her words, saying a white, blonde, British woman. So what I have seen is the first person came to me from the library staff was as well a white British woman who came to ask if we are okay, if we need help, if we want to report it, and we should report it. And again, a man as well, who was white, staff member, he came and he said, this is how you should report it, this is how we can help, we would support you in reporting that incident. So we got the support from the same type of people that were being mentioned as negatively, or as someone who has negative thinking about ourselves. So this was first experience that was very intimidating, and we raised it to the university, and a day after, so same stall, we held that stall for up to a week. So it's a 5-day stall where we raise funds. This library told that we will restrict this person from coming closer to you. We will put security. You are okay to continue what you are doing. And I was like, okay, great. We reported, and the day after, we were approached by another person who approached a volunteer. I wasn't at the stall in that time. It was a volunteer, and he said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And the volunteer, very normally the way we would do, we start explaining what we are doing, raising funds for the orphans, for the people in need, students, or like educate some people who can't get education, stuff like that. He said, you have bigger issues to take care of. And the volunteer's like, sorry, what? And he said, like, and then mentioning the controversy of Jerusalem, that's our headache to take care of that, what's happening, and in a negative way. And he just said, I'm sorry, this is not the place to speak about. The person left, but I've seen that person around this year as well, asking same things to the volunteers, but hide his name from us. And I told them that this is the same person, so they restricted him. However, moving forward from that 2023 incident, these two incidents, the day after, so fourth day, or you can say fifth day, was the last day of our charity stall. The CEO of Student Union came himself to me on the stall, apologized for whatever has happened. He is white as well. So I think right now mentioning this identity is more important, because the support we get are also from these people. And he said that he's happy for me to trigger this issue and raise this issue, and he will stand by us. He came, he apologized. He shouldn't have apologized. It's not him who did that, but he was very kind to come. He doesn't make a student appearance as usual, as he did. So he did that. We raised the issue. I met a couple of report and support members, EDI team, vice chancellor. We have since then we have conducted a few Islamophobia awareness sessions in Salford, which hasn't happened before, or wasn't as common or as well attended by the staff members as it was. Even raising it so much, there were so many gaps that I realized personally. There was no definition for Islamophobia. There was for other hatred crimes, but not for Islamophobia. There was no in particular ruling about such type of issues if they happen within the uni. There was no compulsory training for the staff, and there was the students and the staff was not very well aware. Like one of the student asked their teacher that what happened, like what if something like this happened, what are we supposed to, what is it, like what you are talking about in particular. So people don't even not even staff didn't even have a full knowledge of what's happening, or what if something like that happened, what they can do or what they can offer to the students. Then we have done a couple of sessions in which we have raised this issue, and one of the session I realized that students don't have a faith in what university has to provide in terms of what they might have to offer as a support. And we have asked, I think 17 students in the room, Muslim students, and I think 12 of them raised their hands that they have been a victim of Islamophobia within university by staff, by fellow, by student. And how many of them have reported? I think 4 of them have reported. One of them was me. So 3 other students have reported and no one else has reported it. So by having a lot of conversations with EDI Vice Chancellor and other people, we set up a working group, and that working group has worked a lot. And in 2024 November, we released a first bespoke definition of Islamophobia. And that working group is still, it's not perfect, but it's ours. It's Salford's own definition. We worked on it as a working group. So we are looking forward to improve it in future, but at least we have it now. We have a leadership group for Islamophobia, and we are looking to work on the trainings as well. So I think that's some good work we did within university, and we're looking forward to improve it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amna. First and foremost, I'm very sorry you had to experience this, and the other students as well, but you've handled it beautifully, mashallah, and this will be sort of some of the things we can look at afterwards. Exactly how can we improve, and how can we how would we react in that situation? What's the best solution, really? So I'm seeing now that we're starting to get questions. So everybody asking questions, don't worry, we are keeping them here on record, and inshallah we'll ask them once we've finished going through the different speakers, and some of the questions might be answered actually as we finish going around the table. So Amna, we'll get back to you, inshallah. Thank you very much. So inshallah, I think this is my turn. So as I've been introduced, I'm French, but I've been living in the UK now for 30 years, which is really more than half my life. Alhamdulillah, I have to say, I came before I became a Muslim, and I think there was the wisdom of Allah behind all this, because I needed to remove myself from the pressure of French society, secular French society, where believing in God is seen as something very irrational, backwards. Whether you're Catholic or Muslim, for them it really is not much of a difference. Obviously, Islam being seen as much more of a backwards religion. And to be fair, I had the same views until I actually opened my mind a little bit and researched and heard things properly. I think, Suleiman, you said it very clearly, that people just don't hear things, and Amna as well, your experience showed that. My experience of France as a Muslim is a little bit different than if I had been living there, and obviously I'm very much in contact with French Muslims living there, so I am fairly aware of what goes on through the media, through the news, but also through my friends, and it's not a pretty picture, to say the least. The situation is not great. It's probably getting worse, and we're hoping that it's just a lot of hot air at the moment politically. A lot of sound bites by politicians who've just arrived fresh on their position, especially the Interior Minister, Bruno Retailleau, who is a bit scary in some of his remarks. He goes definitely further than a lot of politicians have been over the last sort of, say, 10, 15 years about Islam. So yes, a situation to keep a close eye on. A lot of organizations have been closed down, hundreds of organizations, schools, small school, madrasas, societies, or small organizations, charity organizations have been closed down over the last few years. on very spurious reasons. Many have been just closed down because they had not updated their safety checks, for fire and things like that. But they were put in the numbers of Muslim organizations that were closed down, which gives the impression to the French people that there are a lot of Muslim organizations operating that are very suspicious and people should be worried about, which is far from being the case. Now, just as an aside, last week, there has been a great success by a school called Averroes, I think, school, who has been, or Avicenne, and they were closed down, and again on very sort of spurious reasons, and an organization which challenges this sort of legal decisions helped them provide the legal support and were able to overturn the decision. They went to the High Court, and the High Court overturned the decision by the local authorities to close down. So there are, it's constant battle basically in France. I just would like to mention that if you go as a tourist, you can decide to boycott France. It's entirely up to you. I know some friends who do that deliberately, but as a tourist, generally, you are not really bothered much because inevitably you stay within naturally more touristic areas. People see you as a tourist, and I've not really felt much discrimination or aggressivity by anyone, even as a French person. So it's very obvious when I speak French, my French is very good. So, but there are some areas where I do tend to speak English very loudly to my children, so they just don't bother me. And I'd say, oh, she's not one of us. She's not French. She's not my concern. She's a tourist. And just naturally, people just switch off. And it's very sad, yes, that I have to do that. But sometimes you just want to have just an easy holiday and just leave me alone. But I've had a few interesting experiences in France. So one of them a long time ago, 20 years ago probably, in the west part of France, in the more affluent part of France. I was visiting my brother, and I was waiting with my husband on the side of the overground metro. Just sat down next to an old couple, and that man just turned around, saw me with hijab, and had the worst look of disgust, and stood up, to the point that my poor English husband asked me afterwards, genuinely thought I was smelling because I didn't have a shower or something. He could not compute how come someone could behave like this. Because remember, 20 years ago, things were not the way they are now in England. But even compared, we're still in a much better state in England here, in the UK, generally speaking, I have to say, alhamdulillah. And the other, so this one I just kind of laughed at because it's just a bit ridiculous. But another one, I was a little bit more unsettled, and it was more unpleasant for various reasons. 3 years ago, something like that, we were in the south of France on holidays. We often holiday there, and our plane was late in the evening from Marseille airport. So we thought we're going to travel in one of the beaches near Marseille, have a little bit of time on the beach, and then we'll go to the airport. And we did not intend to swim, so I wasn't even wearing a bikini, which I do very openly and very happily, do. And I was just flowy, summer dress and hijab. And I even had like a straw hat on my hijab because it was so hot. And with my daughter, my 3 sons, my husband, all sort of teenagers, young adults. And so we went on the beach. And I just did not even realize, when you live in a country where things, like in the UK, where things are fairly relaxed and people just most of the time on your daily life leave you pretty much alone. We entered the beach, and there was a placard with the sort of safety measures, remember, don't do this, don't do that, blah, 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 be careful of that, be careful of that. And there was the first image was a big red cross on top of the picture of a woman with a burkini and a man with long shorts and t-shirts. And it did not occur to me that maybe that should have been an alarm bell. But anyway, we went on the beach, and it was late afternoon, so there were not that many people. And the guy there was a terrace, a cafe with a terrace, and he was packing up his chairs. but he saw me, and I've never seen such an hatred look. And it was, I think if he had daggers, I would be 1,000 times dead. Again, he didn't say anything, but it made me feel so uncomfortable. I felt like I was somewhere I really, really should not be. Even not that I felt unsafe. I think I don't think he would ever go that far, but I really, really felt out of place, and it was very unpleasant because I'm French. This is my country, and as a tourist, I felt this. I imagine how it would be for people who actually live there. And there were other people there. And the sad thing in France is that even people of Arab descent, North African descent, Muslim culture, give you the same look. And that happened to me in a taxi as well in Paris. They give you that look of like, you're a traitor. How dare you? And so we sat on the beach, and to be honest, we didn't stay very long. The atmosphere was just so unpleasant. And later on, we checked what beach it was. It was one of those beaches where they had illegally, according to French law, banned the burkini on the beach. So yes, it's illegal. It has been overturned by their ban has been declared illegal by the High Court, and they are fined probably every year or whatever how it works for banning the burkini on the beach. But they continue to do this. Only 2 beaches in France, so it's okay. You still have the choice. I swim in open water rivers, and it's no issue. But the locals tell a different story, especially, as you said, Suleiman. We benefit a bit from, and it has to be said, from a white privilege. Sometimes even, despite my hijab, people don't always connect me with being a Muslim for some reason. I don't know what they think I am, but just being white, blue-eyed, does give you a little bit of a positive. And so again, I know my experience is not 100% representative of what it would be for someone who's a native Muslim, has been maybe darker skinned, or who is living there. And from what I hear, things are, as I said, things are not going well. So the political situation is pretty similar to what you said, Suleiman, in Spain. It's highly polarized, to be honest. We have, obviously, you've heard all of the national rally, the far right who thinks Islam and immigration is a threat against national identity. We have, on the contrary, with left-leaning parties like La France Insoumise, the unsubmitted France, proposed in 2025, early 25, there's a parliamentary inquiry into Islamophobia, but it's contentious. Critics argue it conflicts religious criticism with anti-Muslim bias. So again, it's said we've not reached a very clear situation on that. So the government avoids the word Islamophobia and would prefer to use the word anti-Muslim racism. And they use laicity, secularism, to justify laws like the 2021 anti-separatism bill and the bans in, as you've heard, most of you, on hijab, the ban of hijabs in sports, abayas in schools. And abaya doesn't mean the black, white, it means even a long summer dress is banned, long sleeves are banned. If you are a Muslim, if you're known in the school as being a Muslim, it's banned for you. If you are brown, of Arab descent, it's banned for you. But there's been so many examples where a girl who's not known as not being Muslim, who has her hair flowing but has a long dress covering her arms, can walk through the school gates without an issue. Because if you might need reminding that in France there's no uniform in school. So legally, the framework is that there's no explicit Islamophobia in law. Anti-Muslim acts are prosecuted under the religious discrimination and hate speech laws. In 2023, there has been a rise of a 57% rise in incidents, and that is according to the Collective Against Islamophobia in Europe, called CCIE. And it's mostly in education, so in schools. The 2024 EU report notes that 39% of French Muslims face daily discrimination. So groups like the CCIE offer legal support, but in 2020 they were dissolved, again on very spurious reasons, allegedly Islamist links, obviously, which shows that, you know, it's quite difficult. They are still existing, but they operate from abroad, if I'm not mistaken. And these are the people who succeeded last week in overturning that decision about that school that was being closed down. So it was a little bit of a Trojan horse situation that we had in the UK a few years ago. Some of you might remember. So the situation that is the way it's progressing, it's not very positive, to be honest. It's a bit scary with this new interior minister who does not mince his words. He talks about a battle between Islamic totalitarianism that threatened the French cohesion. He wants to extend the secular laws to school outings, banning. It's already the case in a lot of schools that mothers with a hijab are not allowed to accompany their children on school outings, although it's not within the school precinct. And legally, they should not be banned. So, yeah, things are not looking good. And sadly, let's make dua for this poor brother. This is the latest victim of a terrible Islamophobic attack on Friday. So 2 days ago, he was a young Malian brother in Alès, in the south of France, in a small mosque. And a man came in. It was early Friday morning, so that brother was cleaning the mosque, and he came in and pretended to want to learn about Islam. And as this Malian brother bowed down, as he was showing him how to pray, as he bowed down, he was stabbed. That man, that criminal, that terrorist, and I will call him a terrorist, killed him. He had more than nearly 50 stab wounds. And I searched the internet. Yes, it is reported widely on French media, but there is not one single media who had the courage to call this a terrorist act. And of course, we all know that the slightest that we had attacks in France, very sadly and very, that really makes my blood boil, where a priest was murdered in similar circumstances, a teacher was murdered, and straight away, within minutes, this was called an abominable act of terrorism. But no, a French person killing a poor Malian brother, that is not something that will, be called a terrorism act. So attack. So this is probably the same in everywhere. Every country. We'll have the same problem in England. And in comparison, my experience in England, see, I know there are a lot of problems, and we heard from Amna, but personally, I have to say, it's been pretty nice. Yes, there are problems. You feel, sometimes you have to be so much nicer than the average person. You've got to smile, brother. You've got to be more polite than others. You've got to be, man, you're like smiling. You know exactly what I'm talking about, to kind of compensate for being a Muslim. But generally speaking, I'll tell you the example. So again, it was about 20 odd years ago. But I was going to give an interview on the BBC in Manchester. And so I was picked up by a taxi driver. And that's the first question he asked me, where are you going at the BBC? And I said, I'm going to give a speech. I'm being interviewed about hijab and its meaning, especially in view of what's happening in France, because it was the beginning of banning hijab in secondary school. And I said, I can't understand why can't they just leave you alone? I was like, this is England. You were in France, I enter a taxi, it's a taxi driver from Arab descent, and he looks at me like I'm the worst person on earth because I'm wearing the hijab, which he considered backwards, and he would like everybody to be blending and not making waves and not, being like the French and more than the French. In France, they say only a good Muslim is a Muslim who drinks alcohol. So, that is just to give sort of a very short example, the comparison between the two countries. So far, alhamdulillah, I am praise be to God. I'm praying a lot that the British continue to be this open, generally speaking, in terms of their openness to wearing different outfits, being from different cultures, being from different religions, and that's my main prayer. So we're going to move on to our final, but certainly not least speaker, Dr. Saqib Qureshi. And we kept you for last because we thought that after these personal experiences, your contribution as an author and researcher and producer and businessman would be a nice roundup of it all more globally. So let me introduce you to everyone. So Dr. Saqib Iqbal Qureshi is a fellow at the London School of Economics and Political Science, LSE, and has written for newspapers such as the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Spectator, the Huffington Post, Entrepreneur Magazine, The Independent. He's the founder and CEO of Building Capital Inc., one of Canada's largest developers of student housing, and more recently, an angel investment firm with 25 investments to date across multiple sectors and continents. Dr. Qureshi's latest book is called Being a Muslim Today, Reclaiming the Faith from Orthodoxy and Islamophobia. In 2023, he was associate producer of Americans, a rom-com about 3 Pakistani women in New York. In 2016, he served as associate producer of the film Rahm, a modern adaptation of Shakespeare's Measure for Measure, set in 21st century Lahore. In 1996, he produced and presented a BBC Two documentary on British Muslims titled Al-Dawa, the first television documentary about the Muslim community in any Western country. Welcome, Dr. Saqib. Lovely to have you.
Assalamu alaikum, Sophia, and everybody else. Thank you for having me here. I don't know, Sophia, and actually, if the rest of you know, that the fleur-de-lis, France's national symbol, is Muslim. It comes from the Muslim world's copy and paste. And I find it quite interesting that people in France talk about national identity being under threat when, the Notre Dame, for instance, is a copy and paste of mosques. So much of France has been borrowed from Muslim civilization. So much of the West is based in and around Muslim ideas, Islamic ideas, Muslim thinking. And so this notion that we are the other, that is Islam versus the West, is something that I think we need to be very mindful of, because it really is intellectually quite bankrupt. I'm shocked by the sheer number of French people that I mentioned that their national symbol is actually straight copy paste from the Muslim world. And they're like, no. And I go, yes, it is actually. It's one of the points that I mentioned in my book, which I'm just going to put on the screen. Came out last year. Unfortunately, everybody who comes to my home takes away a copy of Being Muslim Today. So I've got the uncorrected page proofs version left. And so I can't even show you the actual version. I can only show you the uncorrected page proofs version, unfortunately. But if I can say a few points really in the context of Islamophobia, I think the first is the irony, which is how Islamophobes regularly link our faith and identity to violence. And the irony of that is that the people making the accusation, they themselves have far greater association with violence than the Islamic faith or Muslim people. And so at 3 tiers, number 1, the theology of Islam is overwhelmingly non-violent. Like, you really do have to be a bit of a nutcase to view it any other way. Like, the historical 1400 years of our theological changes and dynamics, overwhelmingly anti-violent, which does not compare badly to vast chunks of the Christian faith. I mean, let's face it, an awful lot of massacres and genocides have taken place under the Christian identity, and they haven't taken place with Muslim fingerprints to them. And so it's ironic from that perspective. It's ironic from a historical perspective that Muslims are not associated with any of the great or worst genocides ever. And it's ironic that in Muslim majority countries today, homicide per capita is lower than it is in non-Muslim majority countries. And so it's like people who regularly accuse Muslims of being violent and being a bit wacko, they are themselves, they are really associated with violence on a scale that the Muslim world simply doesn't see. And so I find that really ironic, that Islamophobes weaponize violence against us when typically they come from identities which are far more associated with this. The second thing really that I think we don't talk about is a bit of a reality check. Islamophobia is not a problem for the Muslim community in the West. And that is really a reality check. We might talk about it at this event, but the big thing for me really is that Islamophobia is not a problem for Muslims in the UK, in Canada, in the US, in Europe. We don't do anything about it. Like this last Ramadan, I actually made a note of the types of requests, charitable requests that I was receiving by email in particular, and also just by attending my local mosque. And there's only one request made of me by an organization that had a finger or a hand or a foot in tackling Islamophobia. And that's both in the UK and in Canada. And I find that very interesting because the vast majority of what I was being asked to donate to was mosque expansions, new mosques, foreign aid, particularly post-tragedy aid. So it's not even like prevent the tragedy, it's the tragedy has now occurred, genocide in Gaza or other issues in other parts of the world. Now let's go clean it up. And I find that really interesting that in Canada, half of this country fears Muslims or fears a Muslim identity at least. And it's a comparable number in the UK. But the Muslim communities, which are the largest religious minorities in both countries, are actually quite okay with that. We have to be quite clear about this, that we are okay with it. We're not prepared to organize, we're not prepared to inject resources to challenge these issues. And these issues are things that we can tackle, but we choose not to. The priority is not this issue. And the final thing that really I find quite interesting and was quite painful to come to terms with in my book was how much of Islamophobia is being funded and directed by people or organizations that have a massive interest in the expansion of settlements in the West Bank and in Palestine. So what I began realizing was that an awful lot of Islamophobia activity is funded and energized by people who want to use that cover to stifle our opposition, stifle the Muslim community's opposition to the illegal settlements in the West Bank and the siege in Gaza and the ethnic cleansing before that and now the genocide. And that was quite disappointing. And I mean, I didn't expect religious centers in the UK or the US or Canada or France to partake in that, but they do. They do raise capital for people to go out there and literally malign the Muslim identity left, right, and center. And so I think going forward, what I would like to see for the Muslim communities in the West is a serious conversation as about what on earth they think is important. And start tackling those things, because you cannot tackle the levels of fear and hatred against Muslims, half of each country that I'm aware of, and I would imagine it's quite similar in the US, but you can't tackle this stuff by just ignoring it or continuing business as usual. And so I've made it a personal point of myself that when I engage anybody who's asking for money, okay, I mean, I do put them on the defensive slightly and say, okay, what's important to the Muslim community right now? What are the important things? Okay, and they'll typically give me the same sets of answers. And I say, okay, how does your raising capital impact those things? How does it do that? And so Islamophobia is very important, I think, as an issue for our community, as is gender discrimination, as is under economic employment. We're very, very poor from a financial perspective. We're underemployed, particularly in France, but in other parts of the world. But these things aren't tackled. We will not organize ourselves and resource ourselves to prevent genocide. We're happy to send, thousands of dollars of band-aids to Gaza, but when it comes to actually the organizing of the community and the resourcing of political lobbying and influencing, not really interested. And so I think the conversations that we need to have as a community is what is important to us? Because I don't buy I don't buy the argument that Islamophobia is an important issue for the Muslim communities in the UK or Canada or the US. Because if it was, you would see some serious energy, some serious financial horsepower. But it's not, and we have to deal with that. And I think that's that's the elephant in the room here. We don't talk about the reality of what we're up against, and it's not external, it is internal. It is our issues when it comes to Islamophobia, I don't think that this is a problem that's really out there. I think it's actually within our community, because if we aren't prepared to defend ourselves on this stuff, if we aren't prepared to prioritize it and tackle it, then it will just continue, and so the real question that everybody, I think, needs to problem solve is that why don't we tackle this? Why aren't we interested in resourcing? Why is it that every second charity fundraising campaign happens to be for a mosque expansion, which is a mosque no doubt surrounded by 10 other mosques within 5 miles away? So I'll give you one anecdotal piece because it really does shed powerful insight as to the depth of this problem. I was part of an LSE Islamic Society alumni group, more than 100, 200 people, and vast majority of whom were a bit younger than me, because I did my undergrad in 95, my PhD in 2001. And even though I'm a fellow there right now, I'm not really involved in student politics. And so much younger. And I would see every 2 or 3 weeks, the only fundraising campaigns were around mosques and around foreign relief. Okay. And that was it. There was no other issue. And this is during the genocide in Gaza. And I was like, guys, with thoughtful social scientists, humanities students, why aren't we focusing on influencing the world as opposed to just picking up band-aids and talking about building a mosque extension? And the tipping point for me, where I kind of just lost it, was a campaign went up for a new mosque to go up, and I decided to go on Google Maps and see where that mosque was, and I typed in search area around it. There were 12 mosques within 10 minutes drive from that location. And I'm like thinking to myself, well, we're seeing the genocide in Gaza. This mosque is going to cost about £2.5 million, which is a third of the budget spent by the entire Zionist lobby in influencing British politics. And yet, it's like we want this piddly mosque in the middle of nowhere. We're just surrounded by the mosques, but we don't want to fund. It's like the mindset shift is just extraordinary that's required. And that I think is a challenge. Until that's done, we can keep talking and it'll be like blowing into the wind. It's like we're just wasting everybody's time. But until we actually get into the nitty-gritty of why is it that we're not tackling this issue, then don't expect right-wing politicians to tackle it for us. And so my book, Being Muslim Today, if I could just make a point of it, is really a book designed to get people to think. Like, this is not just, not just in terms of Islamophobia, but also orthodoxy as well. I had this one very interesting comment from somebody who said to me, who challenged me. He said to me, find me in our faith any evidence that any of our charitable activity or resource can go into influencing political lobbyists. And I was thinking to myself, dude, 1400 years ago, the nature of the state and of government was not what it is today. Government today is the massive elephant in the room. The British government controls $1.2 trillion pounds of funding. It controls legislation. It has armed forces. It has nuclear weapons. It can detain you on terrorism charges. It can prevent exports of weapons. You can do all sorts of things. We didn't have the state or government 1400 years ago that we have today. And yet this person says to me, you know what, you want to raise capital for a think tank, because I was raising capital for a think tank in the UK called Equi, which is a Muslim think tank. And I said one of their functions is that they will hope to influence British politics and the PM's office. And the pushback was, find me some evidence from Quran and Sunnah where we can fund political lobbying. And I really thought to myself, if that is the faith infrastructure that we're going to hold on to, we haven't got hope in hell. Like, we're dead and buried. We're literally dead and buried then. And so being Muslim today, 1,000 source notes that I have is like a 30-year reflection of different directions that I've gone through in my life, and different perspectives and what have you. But it's really a call to get some thought going as opposed to sleepwalking. We are a community that's sleepwalking. We are doing the same things that our elders did 50, 60, 100 years ago and expecting something better to come of it. And that's never going to happen. You just can't you cannot go around. You cannot, what is absolutely amazing, you cannot go around in Ramadan raising money for let's say building mosques or expanding mosques or other bits and pieces like that in the midst of a genocide, okay, and then turn around and say we don't have a problem, we have a massive problem, and pointing the finger at everybody else. It's like you've got 3 fingers pointing back at you. It's like, okay, what are you doing about it? People are complaining about the genocide in Gaza. What are you doing about it? Well, what can we do? Well, you can get rid of your MP for a start. You can outvote your MP. You can organize your community to get rid of your MP if he's a bit of a right-wing Islamophobe. You can do that much. Are you doing that? No, brother. No, don't have time. Got kids, got this. Well, fine. You know what? It's not important. Let's just accept it. So some harsh realities that I think we need to grow up into appreciating. But I think hopefully as we begin to get this conversation out there, we ourselves as a community will have to have interesting discussions, and to the point about how why 12 and 13-year-old kids don't go to the mosque. I mean, I don't really force my faith on my children. I've got 3 teenage boys, and the eldest is 19, the youngest is 14. They will not go to the mosque. They think it's boring. They think it's smelly, and they think, and their critical minds have no patience. Their critical, independent minds, have no patience for this is just the way it is answer, or it's all agreed. Like when my 19-year-old son hears the expression, all scholars have agreed, he immediately switches off because he knows there's nothing in the history of learning in which all scholars have agreed. And so we've got a lot of work to do. And one final point I'll end on, which is that the thing that upset me most in writing my book, and this is coming back to the kind of looking inwards as opposed to keep pointing fingers outside of our community, but the thing that really bothered me in writing my book was, this is the 3rd book I've written. The 2nd was on democracy in the West, which is also reasonably controversial, I suppose. And it hit #1 in Amazon's politics charts actually for a little while. But it's, so my 3rd book, and I have a PhD as well. And this is the very first time I'd written something where almost every Muslim person I knew said, brother, got to be very careful about writing that book. Be very careful what you say. Very dangerous topic. Be very, very careful what you say. And I was like, dude, I'm just trying to have a genuine, I'm just trying to be genuinely as fact-based as I can. 1,000 source notes that I have in this book, and easy style to write in, to read in. And so why do I have to be careful? I mean, I didn't have to be careful in writing a book on democracy or the previous book about strategy, but why do I be careful about this book? If I say something wrong, will the universe implode? Will God blow us all up? Will God be mortally offended? Well, as far as I'm concerned, I've written everything in good faith. I've challenged some bits and pieces. I've reinforced some bits and pieces, and this is the way I've got to. And I've put 1,000 source notes so you can question all. I think we have some growing up to do as a community. So for people to keep reminding me, brother, could be very, very careful, very dangerous. Could be very dangerous. It's like, dude, why? And so Islamophobia is not going to go away until we fix us. And that's really the bottom line.
MashaAllah, what a conclusion. Mic drop there. Very good. Thank you so much. That was very, as expected, very insightful. And we will definitely continue this conversation. But I'm going to now look a bit at the questions that we have received. And I would like us all to try and answer at our different levels. And there are a few questions, and I'm not going to read them all individually because they kind of overlap. And the word that stands out to me is the word fear. So, for instance, there is a fear possibly of reporting Islamophobic attacks, possibly because we don't want to be sort of focused on us, or we feel that it's not going to lead anywhere because there's nothing really that's established to help us to maybe right a wrong. There is someone commenting about Germany and the fear of the rise of the right wing, which I've said we've seen in France definitely, but also in Spain and other parts of Europe and the rest of the world somehow. There's a fear about that, about the repercussion of these sort of right wing, and even we can see, to be honest, in our own government here in the UK, where we don't feel necessarily, although it's a Labour Party, we don't feel very much like the Labour values are being encouraged in some way. So. And also another comment here that what would we advise someone wanting to wear the hijab, but is fearing the repercussions. So it's kind of all in the big sort of theme of the fear of being visible, fear of not being heard, fear of growing, of governments not being supportive of a Muslim presence. Who would like to start answering? Maybe Suleiman or Amna, maybe your experience, Amna, as working in anti-Islamophobia in university?
Yeah, I would. So with that question of fear, there were, I think, the incident I mentioned, with the first incident with the lady, there were at least 7 volunteers on the stall, and they all were like, "Oh no, we don't want to report it. We don't want to report it." Like, I've seen that fear between students as well myself. One thing I have asked them, like, fear of what? What? Think of the maximum that can happen by the fear that you have, and then think of the things that you can come up by standing up for yourself or your fellow students or your Muslim brothers and sisters, and think of it in a way that what's bigger is your fear is bigger of the thing that you are being feared of, or like what you are going to achieve out of it. For personally myself, I am also very focused on why students don't have a trust in reporting with my university. I am speaking to them about this with student union and university both, and asking them to do things to gain that trust. And we were doing different stalls in the library where the report and support team themselves, or the police themselves, during the hate crime week, they are in the library speaking to the students themselves to gain the trust, to build that trust, to calm them down, to like having that conversation. They initiate the conversation with them. So more work needed, but especially the fear of not getting the outcome that you're expecting. Particularly, I haven't got the outcome that I wanted as well. Even though I have a list of things that we have done and we are working on, I did not expect so what happened to the people who did that? What happened to 2 individuals who did that? I wasn't very satisfied with the outcome in that terms. But I'm very happy with with certain things that we have achieved out of it. The definition, the sessions, the work on allyship group, so Palestine Day, the International Palestine Day, is marked in our EDI calendar now this year, which is also wasn't there before. Islamophobia Awareness Month, November's month, is also marked in EDI calendar, which means it will be celebrated across the university, not just between students, staff and student. So think of the things that you can gain rather than thinking of what you can lose. It's always worth more. And I personally, I think what fear, I've been told, what about your degree? I was like, it's okay. What will happen? I won't get a degree. It's okay. It's not a big deal if I get something out of it and I don't get my degree. It's a win-win for me. So I think of it like putting a comparison, and don't be so fixated on I want this result. No, gain whatever you can out of it. Don't be so fixated on what you want in particular. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Amna. What you just said reminded me of obviously the very famous story in the Prophet's life, peace be upon him, where the whole community had been exiled and kicked out of Mecca, and they were suffering terrible hunger, famine, disease, and pain, and they kept just steadfast, patient, and in the end, they came back and were, Allah raised them and allowed them back, and without any arguments and bloodshed or war, they entered Mecca eventually, much later, and set up that great state, city, and civilization eventually. So sometimes we see things a little bit too much kind of on our own day-to-day life, but not the grand scheme of things. And sometimes things are made difficult in our lives, but that's because there's something greater, better that Allah wants us to go to, and to not fear. We have a right. I think this is what very important, I would say. We have a right to be here. We have the right as human being to be anywhere on this earth. We have a right as a citizen to be wherever we live. And if it is made difficult, maybe, if it's too difficult, too risky for me, then maybe you should consider moving somewhere where it's less difficult, but you can then be more productive. But sometimes staying where you are, doing what you do, being a visible Muslim is more productive and better in the long run. So thank you very much. Amna, Suleiman, you would like to add something? Or maybe in terms of the Islamophobia aspect of things, whether we should fear the reactions, or what would you like to say?
I'm actually going to comment more or less. You took it out of my mouth. With Amna, what she was saying, I think there's an underlying current that sometimes we forget, and I'm probably the newest Muslim here, so just please bear with me, that we should return bad actions with better actions. And this Amna was speaking about this lady for a 4-hour, in a 4-hour conversation, and I think Amna managed to return a good actions and good words, and listen to this person, and this person has had an experience of being with a Muslim, provoking the Muslim, and only getting a smile and understanding in between. And this is the most we can do. And I think this is exactly, I learned when I became a Muslim, mashallah, inshallah, not just as phrases to say instead of like hey bro, it means something, so we're in a situation where we're exposed to how do we show the best of what a Muslim can be, especially in difficult situations. And as I understand it, Allah has put us in the situation that we need to be in. Of course, we can't run away and go to a place where it's all nice, because if we run away and wherever we go, we're going to get what we need anyways. So this is for sure. So Amna obviously was there, and this lady had this experience, and I am here, and Saqib, Dr. Qureshi is where he is, and you are where you are. And we have a role to do in how we transmit this, And on the other hand, again, bear with me, I think we have to be very careful not to try to create the same, out of fear, something equivalent to, I think we need to do it, but we're careful, like the equivalent to a political party. A political party or a political party-like institution has its own life, and becomes, has its own needs, and you need to do things that may compromise your faith or your beliefs at some point. So you have to be careful to remember, as Muslim, one of the things that attracted me to Muslims, to Islam, is that there's the important thing what's going on inside, that you're trying to do your best inside, and what's outside has been put there by Allah to help you, or to prove you, or to test you, whatever. And regarding my last comment, inshallah, Dr. Qureshi, about all the people talking to him about or asking for money, funding, raising. There's yes, inner jihad. There's I think a study done that the most bang for your buck or for your pound, it's definitely, if you have to choose, if you have millions of dollars and you apportion equally and all the, like bringing water, bringing health, bringing whatever, the most bang for your buck or for your pound is education. This is where you get the best results, because the next generation, this has been studied over and over, where you have invested in education is where you get the most results eventually. So inshallah, I
Let me
want to
just
say
push
this.
back on that. I don't agree with you. The best bang for buck right now is influencing the elephant in the room, which controls thousands of billions of pounds or dollars. Right now, that is the best bang for buck. It's not education. Our education systems can continue by themselves. If we want to make a positive impact on the world, the number one way of doing it is influencing the Prime Minister in the UK, or the Prime Minister in France, or the Prime Minister in Canada. That is the number one way, because their ability and control over resources is beyond anything we've ever seen in the history of our species. They control billions and can move resources and declare war and stop war and fund things. They can fund like that every new mosque development in the UK if we were organized and if we influenced them. But it's because we don't realize, because we refuse to realize that they have literally 1.2 trillion British pounds is controlled by the British Prime Minister.
Thank you. Yeah, I think maybe to kind of bring both approaches together, I would potentially say that you have to have good and well-educated citizens and Muslims to be able to reach a point where you are confident, eloquent, knowledgeable enough to be able to enter those circles, to be able to then influence, wouldn't you say? Or somehow maybe we are lacking a bit.
Safia, we have that. I mean, we're the largest religious minority in Canada and the UK. We have got by God's grace, we've got so many highly educated people in both countries. I mean, you look at the NHS, the number of Muslim physicians in the NHS gives you a sense that our education standards aren't what's missing. We've got an abundance of highly educated people. Nobody's turning around to us and saying, oh, you know what, those Muslims, they're illiterate. Nobody.
No, I meant more on the political and confidence to go and then speak to the powers that be or to the people that can then influence. And that, but it could also be potentially due to the fact that, as you said earlier, a lot of the time, because we're kind of in that comfortable situation now, so alhamdulillah, nothing's happening to me, therefore I don't need to do anything. I'm happy to just, earn my money, send my kids to private school, and they become doctors and dentists and all is well, which is a bit of the prevalent idea in some communities. Maybe that's the issue, is that people are not feeling like they want to make any waves and they're just happy to be comfortable, but not necessarily pushing the barriers, pushing the situation, the narrative into a different direction. Maybe that is the issue, like a bit too much comfort.
Finish what I was saying before. Sorry.
Suleiman?
No, I was talking about, I think we have a difficulty transmitting to our youth what our religion is about, I think, or to our youth. So we have them for a little while, and then they don't believe our criteria because we can't tell them why. When they become adolescents and they start fighting against, the idea of the parents, they disappear. So more mosques, I don't think we need more mosques because they're going to be empty if we don't have like the next generation to learn, to learn Islam in a way that makes sense for them and structures their life, and not be careful not to accept the Western model of external success as the one important criteria.
Suleiman, would you at this point like to talk a little bit about your project? I think this is kind of a nice
Sure. It's really,
you were mentioning your school, and then we get back to that issue. I've got a more question for Dr. Saqib and possibly Amna, if we have time, but just like a couple of minutes on your school.
Sure, really quickly. So because of what we're seeing about here. Someone mentioned we're working with a school actually in the United States, and a great school, Ihya Revival. They, one of the things that they explained at one point is they were told by actually a Christian person who went to speak to them that there's like a chain between family, school, and mosque or church. And this is the chain of transmission of your deen, of your religion, of your beliefs, and if you send them to public school, the chain is broken because all the inputs during many, many years in very important times of their lives are broken. So anyways, here in Spain, homeschooling is forbidden. You can't do that. So we're trying, and it's really complicated to do anything where the government doesn't get involved. So we're trying to get a school going, primary school for now. Inshallah, will grow into secondary school. So we create a sense of belonging and knowing why. We live here in Al-Andalus and would love to have children reconnect with how Islam is not against science or it's not against anything, try to reconnect with still the vestiges that we have of all those times here. So we have a school going, we have of course, a fundraising, trying to get, we're probably going to go to States now to get some more help. But right now we started a pilot project and we are at the point of having been in the process of certification with MSA and CISNA, which are two certification bodies. If we manage to get that certification and adequate premises, then the Spanish government will allow us to become a private foreign school, and then they don't get involved at all in the curriculum. Okay, so this is where we are right now. So if you want some more information, I can put here a little. Let me see. Sorry. There's a QR code where you can download. I don't know if you can share. You can download the project summary for those of you who want to see it. There's a QR code, and there's also another button for donation. Those of you who can. I know we're not in Ramadan any longer, but anyways, it's always a good time if you want. If not Dhul Hijjah, if you need an excuse, so maybe Dhul Hijjah is coming up and you can do it then. You can wait until then, and. I'm going to put also sorry, in the chat, maybe. I don't know if I can write in the chat for everyone. Let's see. And we're going to be, when you download the document, you will get also, I think there's some Instagram and following, and there's a little group of, in WhatsApp to follow, little things we're doing. We have, children. The other thing is children. We have a Muslim community here. Everything's fine, but something was missing. And they've been going now since October to a school, afternoon school. They're learning a poem in Arabic, Aqid al-Awam. The children now, these 10 kids, when they get together, spontaneously, they start to recite this in Arabic. It's incredible, so they're learning Shama'il, and they're learning, right now, they're like between 6 and 9 years old. And we have 1 hour of English immersion. So after 4 months, they're able to follow a class in English. They were doing like Ramadan lamps and doing it all in English, and they can follow this. My son comes to me and says to me in English, Papa, how do you say 70 in English? And he speaks to me in English. I always wanted him to speak English and he always resisted. And now in this immersion with other children, it's really working. So next year we want to start, inshallah, as soon as we can, the actual school and have, like, of course, Arabic and that. But we want to actually teach primary content like math, geometry, geography, etc., from the not fighting against religion, but from the tawhid point of view. So they understand. There's a science, of course, and you have to see all this. But so they grow up as not Muslims at home, and then they go to school and they learn like the religion is silly, this sort of thing. We don't want them also to go to regular school and then afternoon a little bit of Quran. And so how do we get something more integrated in a place, at least here in Spain, where this is really difficult to obtain? There's no other Muslim school in Spain. So I just
That's wonderful. This is, we really pray for your success, especially when it's short supply, definitely, to say the
yes.
say the
And
least.
anyone wants any more information, download or write to me. I mean, Suleiman.martinez@Revival Al-Andalus. It's really simple to get. I can put in there if you want any more information.
Yes, I think MACFEST will make sure all your details are under any sort of description on YouTube, where everybody will be able to watch this again or if they've not been able to see this live, they can have all your details. Thank you very much, Suleiman. Dr. Saqib, there was a question which could probably take us a long time to answer, but if we can do it quite briefly, what would be your opinion on this? Someone is asking, why is it called Islamophobia and not Muslim phobia, which is what some people say it should be called? And I think it would be apparent, sort of from what's happening in France, this is what they're trying to say. It's not against the religion, but it's more about against the person.
I think so. I've had this debate with a few people, and I think the conclusion that I came up with myself, and I don't want to impose my interpretation, but was that Muslims are being feared because of an interpretation of their faith. Their faith is crazy, it's misogynistic, it's violent, it's medieval, and so therefore Muslims are feared. In which case, the actual relationship between this alleged underlying ideology and the identity of those people becomes really about Islamophobia, not Muslim phobia. Because again and again, what's weird about us as far as Islamophobes are concerned is our ideological beliefs.
Thank you. That is very clear. So just very briefly, we're going a little bit over time, but to be honest, it's a big ask to cover such a massive topic with such wonderful contributors in your own different ways in just an hour and a half. But I'm going to try and keep this short. What would be, since Saqib, you're on, what would be your general suggestion? As you said, it would to counteract Islamophobia around the world, regardless of the culture maybe that we're talking about, the country we're talking about. Generally, broadly speaking, what would be, you think, maybe this? You said the single most efficient, if I understand well, would be to influence politics. But how concretely would you suggest someone, say, sort of a 25, 30-year-old young professional would be able to do that? What would be the concrete steps they could take?
So 2 levels. Number 1, depending on commitment. Number 1 is, if you're really committed to this, organize your own community, your physical community, so that it has an influence in your local MP's direction. Like, so there's a piece around that. So gather 10, 20 people, extend it to 10, 20 more, and build a community of people who actually begin lobbying your MP or lobbying the Prime Minister on a regular basis. Okay, so that's one piece. But another piece is donate to those national organizations who are standing up for us in the space of society and politics. And there are a few of them, like in Canada. I think probably the best example that I can come up with is NCCM. In the UK, EQUI, something that's coming up as well. The Muslim Alliance under, say, the Warsi is also very interesting. Fund those institutions that are trying to influence the political system. And so either you can fund, or you can actually take a bit of action yourself and keep writing in with a community of people and influencing your local MP. So those are the 2 tiers that I would think people really ought to consider if they want to tackle Islamophobia.
So that's interesting, because in the UK, we used to have, now sadly I have to say, an organization called Tel Mama, which has been closed down by the government. There is an organization called MEND, which tackles this sort of issues. But Tel Mama was really the organization people knew about and could report Islamophobic attacks and events. So that's been closed down. There's other issues which I find a bit unsettling, is the fact that for about 20, 30, 40 years, the Muslim community has been trying to get together in different ways. You had the Muslim Parliament, you have MCB, you have, a Muslim Council of Britain, etc. But the government has not been very forthcoming in interacting with these organizations, either declaring them not representative of the Muslim community, therefore they're irrelevant. Sometimes they were a bit right, but at least there were attempts. And now the government itself has decided to create a Muslim national, what is it called, Muslim National Network or something like this, with some leading figures that they've plucked out of whatever, they decided these were going to be the representative British Muslims as far as they're concerned. So I think in some, probably some of our listeners here, and the same, I can see from the question, there's a bit of a, we feel a bit overwhelmed by all this, because we feel like we are making inroads, we are making progress, we are being more visible. There's more British, Muslim MPs. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of, we feel like it's one step forward, two step backwards. I don't know if this is the same feeling you have your end, or whether we just have to keep pushing, don't be disheartened by obstacles.
I think the levels of funding that we have for such organizations in the UK and in Canada are really, really, really low.
So for you, it's just a question of finance. If the money was put there, we would be heard, because the money would be behind.
Well, if you want people who are effective at what they're doing and you want to have an impact, you've got to hire talent. Talent isn't cheap.
Yeah.
You've actually got to spend money for that. And if you're not prepared to do that, then you're not going to get any results. And so you have a bit of a vicious cycle, at least in the UK, with the organizations that you've mentioned, where, I mean, MEND is more of a private organization, like it's been funded by one person in large measure. And so, you know, you've got most organizations are not even cash strapped. Like, they're just literally operating on fumes. They've got nothing. And so they can't recruit people who get the job done, who know how to have an impact, because people don't think the issues are important. And at the same time, you could argue that those organizations haven't done a great job in telling the community, this is what we have done. This is the limited bits and pieces of our successes so far. So please keep donating. But you know, I mean, I look at the talent levels in both NCCM and the organizations that you mentioned in the UK. They're not, you know, I don't expect an awful lot from them, because they've got too much going on. They're not the most talented bunch of people on the planet. They're way, way, way too stretched. And so if we're expecting success from that, I don't really see how it's going to happen. It actually requires consciousness amongst our community to say, this is a really important topic. I'm not going to go around funding any more issues. I'm going to fund the issue that influences the 1.2 trillion pounds or the 800 billion Canadian dollars. Okay, that's the issue that I'm going to now fund. Okay, I'm going to try and direct the resources to influence the government. And so it actually requires something from within us as individuals to say, we're not being very smart about this. There's no point sending band-aids to Gaza if they're going to get bombed because our government is supplying weapons to Israel. Like, how did that make any sense?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally understood. The message is loud and clear, and hopefully we will have some people will actually let you know follow up on that. Just a last question to Amna, just more on a kind of a day-to-day basis. You know, in terms of your experience at university and people who have faced discrimination, Islamophobia, you must obviously, as we said, some people get, you know, more fearful about not necessarily reporting, and they don't feel like they're going to be heard, but also just to be visibly a Muslim. And have you find this an experience in your university, maybe girls removing the hijab or not wanting to wear it because they just fear the backlash? And how would you then encourage them to just not fear that too much?
Okay, so in terms of fear of wearing hijab or regarding where to start, I have had few people around me who have started and who have removed as well. I remember one of the girl who came to me and asked the same question, how I do that, and she said, "Oh, I wish I could." And I was like, "What do you mean you wish you can? What's stopping you?" And she said, "Oh, so she was so my parents are not Britain, I'm not British as well. So we came like 6 years ago here, but she was like a second or third generation here, and she said, my parents and we still are trying to fit in, so for not being discriminated. So that fear that they were having from generations is still in her heart, that she might be discriminated, not being seen as she would if she would fit in. So I think personally, yes, it's hard to a certain level, but it's not impossible. It takes one day. The first step is always the hardest. I also know one of the girl who used to volunteer with ISOC. She wasn't a hijabi at that time, and now she is, Allahumma barik. And she said her inspiration to start wearing hijab was from, she used to speak to her friends, and her friends are like, what's stopping you starting now? What's stopping you starting now? And she kept thinking that until when, until what point I'm going to keep thinking the same thing? When, how? So she started with wearing a stollar, like just a stollar in her neck. Then she started wearing on her head, and taking steps if it's to see how she feels about it. She wasn't used to cover her neck, and then slowly she started covering her neck as well. And then she was on social media, so she wasn't used to hide her face. Now she started hiding her face as well. So 3 people I know, one of them are hijabi, 2 of them are niqabi, very young girls either in college or uni. And for something similar between all of them, that how they overcome their fear for that is one, by educating themselves about how important it is to starting from the very low, like start wearing stole in your neck, around your neck, and then over your head, with not too much difference from what you were doing, and slowly the people around you will get used to seeing you that way, making them familiarize what's not very familiar to them. It helps a lot, and it's always the first step is the hardest. Once you start doing it, you get used to it slowly.
Thank you. I think it's very, very, very helpful. Thank you very much. I hope we answered the question. Suleiman, you had a comment to make. You raised your hand. Just 1 minute.
I mean, to remember something Saqib said, very important. In business, I know he has a business. In business, people think they have a problem until they have to put money. Then, if they don't put money, it's not really a problem. It's an inconvenience, you know. But if I don't consider a problem, it's very difficult to get people to put money, effort, etc. And also agree on this fact that there's a complete drive. I keep telling people, if all the news you had about Catholics was about pedophilia for years and years and years and years, you think all Catholics are pedophilics. You'll see that. And this is what's getting in the news. Yeah? So totally agree with that. I'd like to finish with the other side of what I mentioned in my workshop in Istanbul. Of all the consultants, this one lady who was completely impervious to any input from the outside, but there's another man, high-level executive and consultant, who actually made shahada while he was there. He was so impressed, you know. He came completely afraid of Muslims, and we were praying together and he ended up making shahada before leaving back to Germany. So there's also the possibility, I think, to me, this is like Islamophobia within the person, not structurally. This is a completely different thing. I think Saqib was addressing this. But individually, some people may be open if they manage to be in close contact with the day-to-day life of a Muslim for a week or 2 weeks. Inshallah ta'ala. Thank you.
That is a wonderful way of concluding our really, really interesting topic. The way I see it a little bit, and I think it kind of ties in everything a little bit from what Saqib said, Amna, you said, your own experience. Just basically, we have to treat Islamophobia a little bit like an allergy. So let's consider the people who are Islamophobic or fearful of Islam are allergic to Islam in a sense, like you could be allergic to peanuts or allergic to bee stings. And what treats an allergy generally is the very slow, consistent, and small exposure to what causes an allergy. And this is the principle of homeopathy or others. A lot of allergies are actually treated like this. And so if we are like you in your own level, Suleiman, with the school and your local community or wherever, when you travel and you do your workshops, Saqib with your books and your business work, and Amna with your work as a student's me with the books that I publish, we kind of just give that drip exposure to a different narrative, a different approach, a different understanding, different image of Islam, and we continue to be visible Muslims, active, and then it's very difficult eventually to continue to be allergic to the thing you fear, because you realize actually in the grand scheme of things you know, you might get stung once by a bee, but because you've been exposed so much, you won't react so badly, or you might have that, you know, your body, your brain, your mind has been sort of desensitized to that fear. So hopefully all of us in our own levels, big and small, will help to contribute to desensitize the population to Islam by changing the narrative. And this is what we all have to work towards. And Dr. Saqib, really, I appreciate very much your contribution in that level, because yes, sometimes you have to really speak in very clear terms and not sort of beat about the bush and try and say, oh, things are okay. Well, you know, no, as you say, you have to, there are big ways that we can change things. And if we change the way the governments behave around the world, our governments behave around the world, then we won't have to fundraise for countries that have been destroyed, because this is not what will happen anymore. So that is a very interesting way of approaching things. So thank you so much. I am very sad to say that we have to stop here. Thank you very much, everyone, for your patience, for staying with us a little bit longer. I hope you enjoyed our various contributions. Please do remember to go and buy Saqib Qureshi's books. If you want to show that again on screen, I don't know if people can see you, but the various books, look him up. Go and follow Suleiman Martinez's work, ihyaalandalus.com. Amna, your good work at university. Thank you very much to everyone. Katarzyna, over to you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sophia, thank you so much for wonderful hosting today. Thank you, all the people on the panel. It was an incredible event, honestly. I mean, I could relate to so many aspects you were talking about. I'm Polish in the UK, so you can imagine. I do know a lot of these things from my experience, and it was never about religion in my case. It was just about a different identity that people tied with their origins and the culture. So it's been a journey for me too. And thank you so much also to our audience, because we have overrun today. We were supposed to finish earlier, and thank you for staying longer, and thank you for participating in the discussion. Before you go away, I would just like to remind everybody that we've got an art competition going on. So it's a Muslim Arts Awards. It's an open call. It's a free submission process. You can submit up to 2 artworks as long as you fit in one of the 4 categories: drawing, painting, calligraphy, or photography. So please don't be shy. Don't be a perfectionist. You've got nothing to lose. Let other people, the professionals, take a look at your works and see if you qualify this year for the exhibition at the University of Salford, and maybe for one of the awards. And also we have a couple of events coming up. Next weekend, we've got Afghani women artists, and that's on Saturday. On Sunday, 4th of May, we've got women leading sustainability in Morocco, champions of change in food. And then we've got a live event on Friday, 9th of May, a new play by Adam Cotwell at Octagon Theatre in Bolton. In 2 weeks' time, there will be an exciting event on Saturday, the 10th of May, Tapestry of Pakistan by Mobeen Ansari. And on Sunday, 10th of May, Eid celebration with multilingual mushaira and international poetry. So I hope you will be able to join us. So thank you. That's all from me. Thank you so much.